This meeting is being recorded.
Got it.
They changed it.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first Northshire event of 2022. We're so happy that you're all here. My name is Rachel Person. I'm the events manager for Northshire Bookstore in Saratoga Springs, New York. Here, as I so often am now, with my good friend and colleague, Davith Wood, event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Manchester, Vermont. Before we get started, a couple of quick notes. First of all, you will notice as you're coming in that this meeting is being recorded for future broadcast on our YouTube channel. However, fear not, we have the settings arranged so that only those of us who are unmuted and speaking will appear in that recording. So you can have your camera on and we will not be recording you for perpetuity. In light of that, please do stay muted and use the chat for any comments or questions that you have. We will be putting into the chat in just a moment a blog post that we have up on our Notes from the Shire blog at northshire.com that lists all of the titles that are going to be discussed tonight so that you can follow along and see pictures of them and hopefully order some of them for yourself or friends. We will post that link. David just posted it and we'll post it a few more times throughout the evening. We thank you again very much for being here and from your continuing support. It's been a weird time in indie book selling, and we are incredibly grateful to all of you for sticking with us through this time. And now, without further ado, Davith, why don't you introduce our first bookseller guest?
Thanks so much, Rachel. Yes, it's fun to be back and doing the first event of 2022. And we've got a couple of new faces that I'm excited to introduce to you returning guests. First off, we've got Riley Haddon. They're a adult bookseller at our Northshire, Manchester, Vermont location. And they're an excellent graphic novelist too. Riley, tell us about what you've been reading and some of your favorite books of the last bit.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I should say I attended the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, Vermont. I have an MFA in comics and cartooning and graphic novels. So that is like what my thing is. Also, I don't know if any of you knew my grandmother, Sissy Dibble, but she used to work at the Northshire bookstore. And I just thought that maybe some of you would appreciate that or something. I don't know. Anyway, I had a huge stack, so I'm gonna go through this. I had my favorite books of like the last 2 years, since a lot of them I feel like got kind of lost in the shuffle of the pandemic and such and such. So the first book here, Vision by Julia Griffrey, and she's my favorite American cartoonist. And this is her new book. It came out in 2020, and her line art looks sort of like this. It's got she does everything with a rapidograph, and this is a book. It's a story about a woman who is living in a mansion with her sickly sister and her sickly sister's husband, and she has a haunted mirror who she has an affair with, and it's very spooky and steamy and upsetting because it's all about sickness and dying, and it's really good. Okay, that's my first one, Vision by Julia Griffrey. Here we go. Second book is Kent State, 4 Dead in Ohio by Durf Back Durf. This is a work of comic book journalism. Durf Back Durf went and interviewed and did a lot of research on the event of the shooting at Kent State in the 70s, which I think is this major thing that happened and maybe some people don't really remember, but it was a big deal. And my father, for him, it like changed his life. It was a Vietnam protest where the military fired upon protesters and 4 people died. And this book tracks the lives of those 4 people and the shooter leading up to the event. And it's incredibly well done and very like visceral and shocking and really good, thick work of comics journalism. My favorite ongoing manga from Japan right now, this just ended. It has 11 volumes. It's called The Girl from the Other Side. This is like another sickness comic. It's about this little girl who is trapped outside of the town where she's been exiled because they're throwing everyone out of the town who has this disease. and people who have the disease turn into these monsters that look like this guy, and this guy is taking care of her. And as a father, this comic really spoke to me because my daughter is very similar to this character, and she's very good at maintaining a positive outlook during a horrible time. So very good. The art in this is so good. Just beautiful line work. Lots of nice art in there. My next book is called Ping Pong. This is a 2-volume epic from Japan by one of my favorite artists, Taiyo Matsumoto. In the 90s, he was hired to make a sports comic for a major magazine. And he did that, and he said, I'm going to make a ping pong comic. And then he decided to make it actually about what it's like to be young men in Japan dealing with how hard it is to get through school in the systems there, and how much pressure is put on them to do well and be like a good citizen. And so it's also about ping pong, you know, and there's a lot of great ping pong in here. But you know, the art is just amazing. And this is my favorite book ever, Ping Pong. This is from Korea. Korea has a burgeoning comics scene that is coming to America more and more. People are translating these works. This is called Moms by Young Shinma. In Korea, they call it manhwa, I think is how it's pronounced. And this is about 4 mothers who are working class and are dealing with just pretty much how everything is miserable for working mothers in Korea. And the author it's about the author's mother. He interviewed her and made this book. You know, and it's just also really well drawn. It's just really good. It's a very good, dense read. Moms, Young Shinma. Next is Maids by Katie Skelly. This is about it's a true story about these 2 maids that murdered the woman they worked for. I don't remember their names. It's a real thing, and it's very interesting. And Katie Skelly is a current very popular cartoonist. This is like, her style looks like this. It's very kind of poppy. And she's one of my favorite artists right now. It's very simple. It's very easy to read. But she's kind of like a genius in some ways. The beginning of this comic is one of the most incredible sequences I've ever seen. And I don't want to show it because it's kind of violent and kind of disturbing. So you just kind of like come into the store and look at it and go look at the first page and be like, oh yeah, that's what he's talking about. It's like totally wild. Really good. Maids by Katie Skelly. How is everybody doing? This is a book from China. It's called Night Bus by Zhuo Ma. And again, like Korea, China is not, there's a lot of cartoonists there, and not a lot of it is making its way over here. So the same publisher, Drawn and Quarterly, has been looking out for this kind of stuff. And this is an underground cartoonist they found who'd been publishing his own work with doing zines and mini comics, you know, printing himself, which is what I do, and distributing it himself. And so this is a collection of all of his stories. And it's about his mother. I'm sorry, it's about his grandmother who died. And it's about him dealing with that. And imagining what her life was like in China before, you know, this is what it looks like before the countryside where she lived became kind of ravaged by urban development and sprawl. It's a lot of this kind of, sorry, it's hard to show this stuff, but this is stuff that's so beautiful. This is his grandmother as a young woman, like walking through forests. There's a lot of that. And there's a lot of dreamlike, it's half of it is basically dream comics. This kind of stuff. and it's really cool. And also just like something we don't not necessarily get to see all the time. It's Chinese comics. Night Bus, Shuoma. Next is this book, Discipline by Dash Shaw. I want to talk for a second about New York Review is a publisher. They normally it's New York Review books. We have a spinner rack here, and they do interesting reprints of older novels with really nice graphic design and printing, and they're just kind of like seem very fancy. And they have a comics line, and so if you find their new book whenever it comes out, it's like feels like a big deal. And you know, you can go back to the back of the book and it's like these are the ones that they've published, and it's very selective, so you always know it's going to be like interesting. And the paper is really nice, and the cover paper is really nice. So this is Discipline by Dash Shaw, and Dash Shaw is a very popular underground cartoonist right now, and is a filmmaker. He's just released 2 movies also. It's a big deal, this guy, in my circles. This is his new book. It's about the Civil War. Dash Shaw was a Quaker. I don't know if he still is a Quaker, but this is about Quakers who, a Quaker family during the Civil War whose son decides to join the Union against his whole community's wishes. And which is, you know, the Quaker thing is total pacifism, right? So it was a big deal for somebody to leave and go join the war. So then this is based on extensive research that Dash Shaw did at Quaker libraries. It's all based on real correspondence between these family members, letters that he found. The letters are, you know, written in here, and it's drawn and written like a war journal sketchbook, as if this was, you know, as if this was what the soldier was keeping as a journal. And so it's very, or as a sketch. And if you can imagine somebody in that time keeping a sketchbook, there wouldn't be, you know, the typical panel borders you would expect from a comic. This is all very much like, it's a very interesting and exciting kind of experimental way to make a comic. And it works really well. And the effect it has is it really just kind of draws you in, and it makes you feel really close to these people, and how difficult it was for this guy to be kind of tortured in war. And meanwhile, his family has basically cast him out also because, you know, he betrayed them also. So it's really interesting. It's super good. And it doesn't like, and also meanwhile back home, his family is dealing with all sorts of hardships too, because is that time is just hard for so many people. So, you know, it's very cool. It's just a really interesting book to get into, and I really like it a lot. So Discipline by Dash Shaw. Okay. This is a very popular comic that came out in 2021. It's called Stone Fruit by Lee Lai, who is an Australian cartoonist. This was like on some Oprah magazine list and stuff. It's a big deal. Again, no, this is Fantagraphics. Basically, all of the really exciting graphic novels that we get are usually either from Fantagraphics or Drawing Quarterly. Those are like the 2 biggest publishers in this realm. And they usually are, and I like New York Review books too, but they usually are kind of, you know, you're going to get some interesting stuff from them every year. This is about a couple, and they're gay. One of them is trans, and they take care of their niece. And you can see the art style where the niece turns into this kind of like creature. And so what happens is they take care of their niece, and they get into they run in the woods and they play with her and they turn into these animals. And it's about this kid, and the kid lives with her single mother who's very busy and very stressed out all the time. So when she gets to be with her aunt and her partner, they get to like let loose, and the kid gets to be free and feel like an animal, and like they get to, it's really amazing to think about just like the true kind of what a kid needs sometimes, and how hard it is for an adult to, as a parent, it's sometimes hard to go with them on that, like that trip that they need to like really get their energy used, you know. And sometimes it's like you're with an animal and you just need to run through the woods. And it's so cool the way she's depicted this by where they kind of transform into these creatures together. But meanwhile, the relationship is strained because this character's family is very religious and does not accept her as a trans person. But meanwhile, also their relationship is strained because she has a lot of difficulties with that she hasn't worked out. So she leaves and goes back to her family, and it's a lot of it is about how horrible that is to deal with, but how she had to deal with it to like move on with her life. So that's really what it's about, and it's very good. It's very good. It really goes places, and I really recommend it a lot. I think everybody should look at it. Stone Fruit, Lee Lai. Okay, I have one more. I don't know how to pronounce this. Mycelium watsonii. There's a, so this is by Brian Blomerth. And I think this is my favorite work of 2021. I think this is the best book. And because of the way it's just incredibly beautiful. I think of this more as like just an art book that I like to flip through and just kind of look at, because the art is, I don't even understand it, you know, it's so ridiculous. So like this spread along, like, so it's about the husband and wife couple who brought psychedelic mushrooms to America, basically, or they went and did a lot of research in Mexico to learn about the sciences behind these things. And then, but it's also about they became a couple because like they fell in love because of mushrooms, and not because of just psychedelic mushrooms. They loved cooking and eating mushrooms and going around and foraging. Look at this, isn't this amazing? Foraging and learning about every kind of mushroom and how to cook them, and so this book is full of these like really amazing diagrams and recipes, and it's really fun because they're like these funny animal characters from like, it's really, you know, the old timey kind of it's drawing, sort of almost Disney style, Flesher animation style. I just want to show off all these colors. And I know like my camera isn't really capturing it very well. Again, like these are books, you really need to like hold them in your hands. Like a big thing with graphic novels is the book is part of the art. And this book, the paper, you have to feel the paper. I need you to come into the store and just feel the paper. It feels so nice. It's got a little bit of a texture, and it makes the colors not feel digital, which is really amazing. It makes it feel like it was like painted right into this book. That's such an amazing experience. If you think about graphic novels, not as like, I'm gonna go read a novel, and that's the experience I expect. If you think about it more like spending some time with a book of poetry, I think that's closer to what you should have an expectation for if you're thinking about delving into this kind of work. Because most of the time you buy one of these and it's expensive, and it takes you about a half an hour. It takes me about a half an hour to read this as a story, right? But the difference is I've looked at this book like a million times since then, and I'm so glad I own it. because the experience of spending time with it is so special to me, just as an object. And so I want to stress, like, if you are not someone who is interested or has been interested in this medium, I want you to realize it's a different medium. It's as different from novels as movies or poetry or art books or anything like that. It's its own thing. And so I want to stress that because it's something that I care a lot about, and I really want to expand the reach of this art form. So that's my pitch. Does that make sense? And that's my stack. I think, did I hit the time? Okay.
Yeah, fantastic, Riley. Thank you so much. That was really great. They recommended some titles that and some books, some staff picks that I definitely used on my Christmas list for my kids this year, and they're loving them. My kids.
Yes, John Janae did write a play about those maids. I knew that play. I was in that. I did some work on that play.
Nice. Thanks so much, Riley. Well, next up, we've got Cassidy Washburn from Saratoga Springs store. She's our major domo of all things web order over there. Cassidy, tell us what you've been reading and some of your favorites lately.
All right. So I have about, let's see, 7 books here, and more than half of them are actually on my favorite books of 2021 list. So that's saying a lot. But the first one I want to talk about is Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. This is a science fiction novel, but it's very lighthearted, not too dark or deep or anything like that. It follows a woman named Shizuka, who has made a deal with the devil to become immortal. And in exchange, she has to deliver 7 souls of violin prodigies. She herself is a violinist, very famous. So far she has delivered 6 souls, and then she meets Katrina, who is a young transgender runaway who has a real talent for playing the violin. We follow a bunch of different characters besides those 2, but one of the best things about this is it honestly felt like I was like receiving like a warm hug throughout the whole thing, because even though there's the dark theme of souls being taken away from children, it does have that lighthearted side of things. One of the characters in it is a lesbian alien who runs a donut shop, and that's basically all she does. She's there running the donut shop. Great characters. It does a great job of balancing the light with the dark. There's funny aspects as well as the darker themes. Katrina herself is looked down upon, not accepted for who she is. Slowly she does learn to accept herself, and other people around her learn to do so as well. This was really like a joy to read. I flew through it. Has really unique characters, beautiful writing, and it's just one of those novels that if you are looking for a lighthearted science fiction novel with great representation in it, then I recommend checking this out. So that's that one. That was Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. And then the next one I have here is Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky, who is a very popular science fiction author. This one follows an anthropologist set on a faraway planet, basically, and he's just there to kind of help the locals out and just kind of observe them, but one of them does go to him for help beating like this really formidable foe. The central quest of this novel really resembles a fantasy novel, so that's a great kind of parallel. There's fantasy and science fiction in it, and it's super fast paced. It's not a very long novel at all. There's great aspects and some of the most unique writing I've seen in a really long time. There's just this great chapter that I couldn't believe I read. I'm not going to spoil it, but it was just phenomenal. I honestly had never read anything like it before. So it's one of those novels really unique that will constantly have you turning the page. And another one that if you're looking to get into either science fiction or fantasy, I would check it out. Like I said, it's not very long at all, so you could probably fly through it. This is Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. His name's pretty long there, but next I have The Chosen and the Beautiful by Ni Vo. This is actually a Great Gatsby retelling. This is a fresh new take on the classic story. It follows Jordan Baker, as many of you will know, is a character from The Great Gatsby, as she is a queer Vietnamese immigrant in this story, and she's navigating the dazzling society of the 1920s. It is a coming of age story that's filled with like mystery and exclusive parties, and there's a little dash of magic in there. Some of them are magicians, not a lot, so don't be turned away. It honestly has really rich prose and just beautiful imagery all around. And this is just a perfect read for fans of the original source material itself, as it basically follows everything directly from The Great Gatsby, but it's following Jordan's point of view. So there are a few extra things added in there, as we didn't follow her most of the time in The Great Gatsby. So it's good for fans of Great Gatsby, as well as new readers alike. And I honestly think that it would be a great parallel in classrooms now if they were to read Great Gatsby and then follow it up with this. I think that would be a fun new take on the classic story and the classic way of teaching it. So yeah, this was The Chosen and the Beautiful by Ni Vo. Beautiful cover there. And also it's not very long either, so you could probably fly through that one as well. Another short one is a very surprising one for me, and that is Comfort Me with Apples by Katherine M. Valente. Not long at all. It's a little over 100 pages. This one is weird, honestly, but it is one of my favorite books of 2021 because of how strange it was. So it follows Sophia, who just lives this very idyllic life, very perfect, and in a place called Arcadia Gardens, and she lives there with her perfect husband and perfect neighbors who all are making sure that everything in her life is just perfect. But then strange things kind of start to happen, and Sophia realizes that maybe things aren't as perfect after all. It's very twisted. There were times in here where I had no idea where the story was going to go. So there's that touch of mystery in it. I would say don't read a lot of book reviews for this, because it honestly will probably spoil a major plot point of this novel, because the ending for me, not knowing anything about it, it was jaw-dropping. I could not believe how it ended. Again, this is Comfort Me with Apples by Katherine M. Valente. Okay, and then I have one that I'm sure many have already talked about, but I have to also mention it, and it is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. This is just a cute, adorable fantasy romance. It's a soft fantasy romance. It perfectly blends the two genres together, and does so with the utmost care, in my opinion. It's really a marvelous marvelous story. I was rooting for the two main characters the entire time. It follows Robin Blythe as he's kind of thrust into this world of magic after a curse is placed on him, and helping him is this cold and prickly guy named Edwin Corsi. They are both lovable characters. They just stole my heart. It's a very compelling love story with that touch of fantasy, because it is there are magicians in this world, and there's mystery as to who put this curse on Robin, and they have to figure that out and make sure that he could survive the curse and stuff. So I think this is going to be the first one in a trilogy or a series. I'm very excited to see where it goes. It is just a very, very sweet fantasy romance. Nothing too heavy on the romance or the fantasy. So if you just kind of like things just in the middle, this is like the perfect one for you. So this is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. Love that one. And then I'm going to talk about The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. She is the author of Mexican Gothic, which is a very popular one. I've also read it and absolutely loved it. This one did not disappoint. She has become one of my favorite authors of all time at this point. At its heart, this is a romance novel that follows a young woman named Nina as she makes her societal debut, looking to be swept away by love. She just wants to find love. And soon she meets a man named Hector, who is this entertainer / magician who kind of like literally is going to teach her magic because she is also a magician. And this world has kind of similar to the last few I mentioned, The Chosen and the Beautiful and Marvelous Light. There are magicians and witches in this world, but nothing too heavy on that. Like I said, at its heart, this is a romance novel. Sorry, my kitten is just attacking me at this point. But this is following Hector and Nina as he takes her under his wing, and they never expected to find love in each other, but who knows how long this love can last, because there are dark secrets that threaten to tear them apart, as well as one of the most hateful characters I've ever read in a book. I hated this one particular character, and that just shows how good of an author Sylvia is to create a character that you hate so much, but like you want to keep reading and root for the two protagonists, the two main characters. So it was just a charming story, beautifully written, and I flew through it. It was just really, really well done in my opinion. So that was The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And then I have one more to talk about here, which is a romance novel. It is The Heart Principle by Helen Hollong. This is the third book in Helen Hollong's, can't remember the full name of the, I think it's Kiss Quotient trilogy, but you don't have to read the other two before this one. It can stand on its own. It is not your typical rom-com though. It is a tale of self-discovery and grief. It follows Anna, who is a violinist. I just realized I had two books on here that follow violinists, and I never read those, so that's kind of fun. So she's a violinist who is just burnt out from a very successful music career. And it also follows Pong, who is a tattooed clothing designer and a cancer survivor. So it follows those two as they go through life and meet each other and find love within each other. And it's just really, really beautifully done. You know, something tragic happens that may tear them apart. So it has those classic tropes of romance novels. But honestly, it was one of my favorite of Helen Hollong's at this point. I just thought it was incredibly moving and dealt with topics such as late diagnosed autism, cancer, and hospice care in a really great way, and I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. So that was The Heart Principle by Helen Hollong, and that was my last one.
Cassidy, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure for me to see the Saratoga people sometimes and hear what you guys have been reading. Thanks a lot. Up next and last, it's James Case. He's our new floor manager in Vermont. He joined us recently from Washington, D.C. James, tell us about what you've been reading lately.
Yeah. So I've got a couple different things. There's a few I couldn't find a copy of, so you'll just have to imagine them, but they are all listed on the website. I wanted to start off actually with a kid's book, which is right here. Well, hold on, sorry, figuring this out. Okay, there we go. It's called The Room for Everyone by Naz Khan. I actually came here from Washington from Kramer's Bookstore, which I don't know if anyone's familiar with, but it's a kind of another landmark down in DC. And I work with Nas. And so this is her first children's book. It came out in October. And it's just like, I mean, besides the fact that Nas is incredible, it's just a really, really lovely, lovely children's book. It's rhyming. It's essentially about these two siblings named Musa and Dada, who get on a bus that's already crowded. And as they're traveling, more people continually try and get on the bus. And Musa just complains the entire time and keeps saying, there's no room for anyone. There's no room. We can't fit them. Like there's people coming on with bicycles and chickens and fruit. And his sister keeps insisting that no, there's definitely room for everyone. And so it has a great moral. It's a wonderful story. The illustrations also are like, it's Merce Lopez, who I definitely don't know, but he did a fantastic job with like a bunch of the illustrations. They're really beautiful, and it's a great book. So highly recommended. If you have any kids or who might want to check it out, it's really fantastic. So for the next one, I'm going to mix it up with some of the ones that I unfortunately don't have a copy of. Another one is actually a much older book called Gunnar's Daughter by Sigrid Undset. She wrote this extremely long one called Kristin Lavren's Daughter. And she actually won a Nobel Prize, so she's a pretty renowned writer. But Gunnar's Daughter was written long before then. And it's kind of in the vein, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like Poetic Edda or like Icelandic sagas. And when I actually originally read it, I just assumed it was written in like the 9th or 10th century, and only later realized that it was like written in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. But it revolves around two characters. It was one's named Vigdis, the other one is named Vigalat, but essentially they have this relationship that revolves throughout the book. It's very kind of Shakespearean. It's definitely a tragedy. But it really just kind of revolves around these two characters. The writing is excellent. Like I said, it's very much like a period piece. It reads literally like sort of these much older works, but it's extremely well done. It's hard to put down. Not a very long work, but definitely highly recommended. It's a really good little one. Next up, I've got this book called Sweet Days of Discipline by Fleur Jaeggy, who's a Swiss writer. She writes in Italian. This is probably she's a neat one to check out, honestly, if anybody decides to pick this up and take a look. She's a really interesting writer. And that's honestly just one of the strong suits of the book. It takes place, it follows a girl in boarding school, and she gets obsessed with this other student who's like seemingly perfect, named Frederic. And it's not a book where that's really plot focused. You know, it's not a thriller. There's no like car chases. It's really kind of just an interior monologue almost. And it's sort of her reflecting about her experiences there and summing them up. And it's just incredibly well written. I think who wrote the quote, Susan Sontag described it as savage. And that is very spot on. And I always love that little quote. But the writing is excellent. And I just think Fleur Jaeggy in general is a really incredible writer. And certainly someone to check out if you're into any like sort of literary fiction or anything like that. But yeah, it's just really well done. Also not a gigantic novel. But yeah, definitely enjoyed it. All right. So let me see. Another one, moving into actually a fantasy, is this one's much newer. Alex Felbeek. It's called Mordu. And it's kind of in the vein, actually, what it reminds me of, it is not a kid's book. I wouldn't give it to like a 10, 11-year-old, but it is very much like a C.S. Lewis kind of, or Phantom Tollbooth, some of these older books. That's a bit how it reads, certainly with more adult subject. But it kind of takes place in this fantastical city that's called Mordu, and it follows a central character named Nathan as he's sort of coming to grips with this strange power he has. In the books, it's referred to as an itch. And essentially when he scratches this itch, like sort of terrible things happen, both good and terrible. I mean, it certainly benefits him at points, but as he grows older, it kind of, or as the novel progresses, he kind of sees the outcomes get more and more dangerous, and certainly the subject matter gets heavier. But there's some really memorable characters, and like there's like a talking dog, there's a very strange butler. I mean, it's excellent, and I think also very well written. It's certainly peculiar, and not a regular fantasy by any stretch. but I was really pleasantly surprised and enjoyed it quite a bit. So I would definitely recommend. I thought it was great. And if you ever enjoyed anything like C.S. Lewis, like I said, or like Phantom Tollbooth, I think you would actually like this. But maybe don't give it to your 12-year-old. All right. Another one that I'm unfortunately don't have a copy of is called In the House in the Dark of the Woods. And it's by a writer named Laird Hunt. And it's another pretty slim book, but it's basically begins with a Puritan woman who gets lost in the woods in colonial America. And she can't find her way. She starts to panic, and then she stumbles on this very strange cottage. And from there, the novel kind of devolves into this colonial horror story of sorts that revolves around like witches, and it's excellent. It's another kind of strange book, but it's not a long read by any stretch. I think I read it in a day, actually. And it's a very good one. I mean, and there's also some interesting morals packed in there. And really kind of the whole novel revolves around the central female character who seems lost in the beginning and then kind of comes into her own. But Laird Hunt is a really good writer. He's done some other ones that are also, I think he just had an anthology that came out actually that's all like American horror stories. And it's not actually very scary. Didn't keep me up or anything at night, but it's a good book and very entertaining and also just interesting. There's a lot going on. So yeah, that's In the House in the Dark of the Woods by Laird Hunt. So moving on, we'll actually jump over into some nonfiction. This is certainly also not a new book, but it's called Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford. It's been around for a bit, but it essentially, all it is it just talks about Genghis Khan, really, his whole rise, his impact on the modern world that dispels some of the, or at least cracks into some of the myths about him. And all in all, is just, I mean, impossible to put down. I couldn't stop. I think I kept my wife up for like 2 nights straight, just bugging her with these weird facts. But some of, I mean, the story literally is better than fiction. Like there's things there that are so unbelievable, you would never think they could have possibly happened. Just even with his early life, I mean, you're talking about a historical figure who was literally enslaved at one point and then went on to conquer like one of the largest land empires in history. It's actually like literally came from nothing to become this massive historical figure. And even there's a lot of talk even of just about like the Mongol society, which was much more fair and like gender balance than a lot of their Western counterparts. And, you know, there's a reason like Marco Polo and all these people were desperate to go over there is because they were so advanced. And it's just a really fantastic history book. I really, if you like history at all, would highly recommend it. I could not stop reading it. Got pretty obsessed. He also wrote one called Mongol Queens. That's also another good book. And I would definitely recommend that. I just wouldn't say don't read them back to back, which I did because there is some overlap, but still a very good book. And so if you're interested in that at all, I thought they were both excellent. But Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World is fantastic. So I got 2 more. The first one is unfortunately another one that we sold out of. So it's called Traveler of the Century by Andres Newman. He's a contemporary writer. I think he's probably in his 40s, lived in Spain, but he was born in Argentina. And the book is in the vein of very much of Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. It takes place in a completely made up city where the main character kind of stumbles in there in the midst of his travels, and he just can't leave. Every time he tries to leave, something happens. And he ends up staying in the city for an incredibly long time. And he meets sort of a cast of characters, and very much like, I don't know if anybody's read Magic Mountain, but very much in that vein, they just get into tons of philosophical discussions. There's romance involved, a really good romantic story, actually. They get into some heavy material, but it's written so well that honestly, it's just not a hard read. I found it to be incredibly enjoyable. It's actually a really nice, especially when it's like, if it gets cold and it's snowing, it's like the perfect book to just camp out by the fire with. I found it to be immensely enjoyable, like very well written, hard to put down. There's a lot of really nice elements. Just a really beautiful book. It is not tiny like some of the other ones. It's actually pretty thick, but it's a great book. And Andres Newman also is just a really interesting author, and hopefully he keeps putting things out because he's still pretty young. So I'm hopeful we'll get a bunch more books by him. All right, and then the final one we're going to actually jump back into a fantasy novel. This is Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Gilman. He's written a bunch of horror novels, which I haven't read. I actually picked this up just blind. It came out last year. And it's just, I mean, the key word for it is just, it's fun. It's just incredibly fun. Picked it up and I just couldn't put it down or stop talking about it basically since then. I've given it away more than I've bought it at this point. So I keep losing my copy, but essentially it's kind of a normal, it's like a very, in some sense, like a traditional quest book for fantasies. So it follows the narrator as he sort of goes on this quest trying to rescue literally a princess, which sounds very normal, but the writing is excellent. It's incredibly fast paced, very funny. The whole world he builds is extremely interesting, and like the magic systems he uses are really not like anything else I've ever read. It was just a great book. I mean, it was one of the more enjoyable reads I've had in a while, where I just had fun. I mean, I just had a really good time reading it. And if you like any sort of fantasy or high fantasy or anything like that, I would highly recommend it. It was a blast. And I also did get a little while ago, actually, I got a little note from the author who somehow tracked me down. And he signed it as one of the gods from the book, which was very cryptic and strange, but I definitely enjoyed it. Or else just some random person in Ohio sent me a really strange letter. But I'm hopeful. So, but yeah, it's Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Gilman, and it's really excellent. So, but yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks so much, James. We are just about out of time. I've loved having some representation of sci-fi and fantasy and graphic novels tonight. That was really great. We haven't been having too many of those on these book chats yet, so it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you at another Northshire event sometime soon. Next week, we've got a cozy mystery night on Tuesday and on Saturday, a Martin Luther King Day event with Michelle Coles for her book, Black Was the Ink. Thank you all again so much for joining us, and we'll see you at another Northshire Presents event soon.
And you can find all of the titles discussed tonight at northshire.com, including on the most recent blog post on our Notes from the Shire blog. So you can go there either through the link that we sent you, or just go straight to northshire.com and click on Notes from the Shire and find all of the titles we talked about this evening. Have a great night, everyone, and thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.